Right, Zimbabweans, it's time that we have a really serious conversation about this pink elephant in the room, which is the compensation of white farmers for developments made on stolen land. It's time that we have a serious discussion, because whatever is going to be decided now, whatever we do now, wherever the money is going to come from, whatever debt our government is going to incur, is going to affect you, me, our children, and 4 to 5 generations of our great-grandchildren if we don't address this issue properly today. What I'm shocked with is that Zimbabweans are surprised and annoyed by the fact that the Zimbabwean government is going to compensate white farmers. It has been in our constitution for the past 6 years since the constitution was drafted, and none of us did anything about it. And many of you Zimbabweans support the compensation of white farmers because you think it's going to take sanctions away and Zimbabwe will be brought into the group of nations and success is going to come back to Zimbabwe. But last year in January, in 2018 January, I made a video explaining to you that that's not how it was going to work. I told you that the government would be forced to take a huge debt, a debt that's going to take centuries for our children to pay, and in the meantime sanctions will remain. Zimbabwe will not be able to take any loans for development because we're going to be busy paying white farmers and mortgaging our resources for those white farmers to be paid. That is what we call colonial debt. They hang this debt around your neck so that you are not able to develop, so that they can get access to your resources. I made this clear. I also went to the extent of saying that a business partner of mine was saying that his father had been compensated for a farm that they lost in 2002. And he was compensated in January 2018, but he said that our government had already started paying compensation for at least 2 years prior to that. So our government was not telling us that it was already compensating white farmers. It was negotiating with the British, Americans, Europeans without talking to us as Zimbabweans. And now we are seeing our government saying that from next month they're going to start compensating white farmers, which is a lie because they've already been compensating white farmers. So why are they telling us now? The only reason they could be telling us now is because they want to prepare you and me for the debt that we're going to have to pay for the compensation of these very same white farmers. In that last year, I said, let us write a petition to our parliament, a petition to the British government, so that we can pressure these two parliaments to be oversight on the negotiations taking place between our government and the British government for the compensation of white farmers, and so that we could find out who is going to compensate these white farmers, how it is that the valuations for the compensations were being done, so that we could be part and parcel of the decision-making process that is taking place. And you remember, the British government has had a referendum with its people to determine whether it should stay in the EU or leave. But our government can't even have a referendum to determine whether we want white farmers to be compensated or not. Now, our president is now saying that he is merely following the constitution. That is why he is paying these farmers. What our president is doing is disingenuous, and he's not being honest with us. Because those that understand the COPEC process that was involved in negotiating our constitution say that our president, as a chief negotiator together with Chinamasa, with Tendai BT from the MDC, were the very people that pressured and lobbied for this clause of compensating white farmers to be put into our constitution. He did this under the lobby and pressure of the Americans, the British, Europeans, and I understand that even white South Africans with vested interests were also involved. I even understand that consultants who were involved in the drafting of the South African Constitution were involved in the drafting of the Zimbabwean Constitution to ensure that clauses of compensating white farmers similar to the ones in the South African Constitution will be put in our Constitution. So what this means is that our president was involved in creating the Constitution that he is now trying to implement. That is a conflict of interest. And we need to question whether the Constitution of Zimbabwe is a Zimbabwean constitution or it is a constitution that is serving the interests of foreign powers, foreign financial interests, bankers, and business people that are not Zimbabwean. Now, this is a critical point because this tells us what we must do. Now, the Constitution of Zimbabwe acknowledges that land was stolen during colonialism. It acknowledges that this land must be returned to Zimbabweans. It acknowledges the need for decolonization in Zimbabwe. Our constitution goes a step further to say that the laws that must be created in Zimbabwe must, number one, be aligned to international convention, international customs, or legal customs. It must be just, equitable, fair, and in the interest of the Zimbabwean public. This is the point that is going to make us have a basis to challenge this compensation of white farmers. Now, if the Zimbabwean constitution acknowledges that land was stolen, if it acknowledges that land must be returned, which is restitution, it means that before we can even talk about the compensation of white farmers, the concept of restitution, which says that if something is stolen, the person that stole the property must return the stolen property to who it was stolen from. Once they've returned it, they must restore it to the condition that it was before it was stolen, which means that the white farmers must return our land. They must return it with the trees it had, the wetlands that it had, the marshes that it had, flowing rivers that were not silted, take out the chemicals from the soil, and bring back our virgin land that they stole. And if they can't do that, they need to pay damages to restore us into the condition that we would have been before. It doesn't end there. Then there is something called there's something called damages and the return of unjust enrichment. So if they made money, if they made profits from colonizing us, taking our land, taking our cows, using our labor, stealing our resources, they must take all that unjust enrichment and pay us back, and they must pay damages for whatever unjust enrichment that they are unable to return. That was supposed to be the first step that took place in Zimbabwe, according to international customs, according to common law, according to restitution precedents that has been in the world before. That would mean that there would be nothing called the compensation of white farmers for developments made on stolen land. It would mean our government cannot recognize restitution or compensation for developments made on stolen land. So, another thing, we need to ask the question that if the government of Zimbabwe does not have money to pay basic services, it can't give people health care, can't really improve our education, can't build infrastructure, can't give people the human rights elements that are supposed to be given to us according to a secret treaty that they signed, can this government then go and take new loans when they can't pay their current loans to compensate white farmers when they can't even give Zimbabweans basic services and basic needs? For me, that would be unjust, it would be unfair, it would be inequitable, and wouldn't be in the interest of the Zimbabwean people for our government to go and take a loan to pay white farmers while Zimbabweans are not being taken care of by the very same government. It would also go against the preamble and the spirit of decolonization, because we'll be paying a colonial debt while it is that the colonizer has not paid reparations and has not been forced to give us restitution. So these are the grounds upon which I think we can challenge the current compensation of white farmers, particularly if that money is supposed to come from Zimbabweans. If that money comes from the British government, that is a different case altogether. Then there is the issue of the few farmers who bought land, or companies that bought land in Zimbabwe after bilateral agreements between our government and foreign governments, who lost their land that they got after independence. There might be a case for those to get compensation, and those are the issues that we want our government to discuss with us openly, transparently, with the media and parliament being oversight to tell us what is going on. Now, what are the consequences of us paying white farmers now? The Herald is talking about 3 billion. I don't believe the Herald, because it never told us that white farmers were being compensated over the past 3 years. So there are people like Eddie Cross who are talking about 9 billion to 30 billion. If we were to take on the debt of 30 billion to compensate white farmers, what would that mean? It would mean that our government has to go and take additional loans to the 7 billion that we currently owe. They'll go and take that loan, and to take that loan as a government that is known for not paying its debts, they would incur a very huge interest. This huge interest that they would incur would mean that we have to benchmark with previous loans to know what that interest would be. So, when the Rhodesian government took debt for the Kariba Dam, 480 million to build the Kariba Dam, which in today's terms would be about $2.5 billion. They got a loan from the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, and that loan was at 5.5% per annum on the US dollar. So if Zimbabwe was to take a loan today to compensate the white farmers for 9 billion, 3 billion, or, I would assume that it probably would be a 10% interest. If it is a 10% interest, you need to understand what that means. If you are paying a 10% interest, it means that the principal amount will double every 7 years. And the debt that was given to Rhodesia was supposed to be paid in 42 semi-annual payments. They needed to make 2 payments every year, so in 21 years they should have finished paying off that debt. What is interesting is that we are still paying off that debt for the Kariba Dam today, almost 60 years down the lane, because we failed to meet up with the repayment terms. We failed to repay the amounts that we're supposed to pay. So it's 60 years of us paying $480 million. Now imagine if we take a loan of 3 billion, 9 billion, how long is it going to take us to pay that debt at a 10% interest rate? Because we are guaranteed that whatever we're going to pay for the debt to pay back to farmers, we're going to pay a higher interest because we have got too many debts that we haven't paid. We are known for not paying debts, so we will be charged a higher interest. It might even be 15%. And as a nation, if we at that very time cannot take loans to build new roads, new electricity capacity, develop new infrastructure, develop hospitals and schools that are going to be able to take us into the 4IR era, we are not going to be able to develop, we're not going to be able to industrialize, to be able to have enough money to pay off this debt. So how are we going to pay off this debt? Chances are we're going to have to mortgage our resources. We're going to have to give the inheritance of our children, the lithium, the gold, the platinum, the oil, the gas, in order to pay that debt. That's why I was saying to Zimbabweans last year, we need to stand up now, to do something now, to start holding our government accountable and to force them to speak to us, hold a referendum and have the parliament as oversight, because the debt that is going to come out of here is going to be so huge that it will take centuries for our children to pay it while our resources are being mortgaged, not for the benefit of Zimbabweans, but for the benefit of foreigners. What has been promised to the finance minister of Zimbabwe, who comes from the Bretton Woods institutions, our president, and all those who lobbied for this clause of compensation of white farmers to be put into our constitution before restitution was put into our constitution? These are questions we must ask. And we must start looking at legal minds taking us to take a legal charge or to make this government account legally for this restitution and compensation. The chances are these people that constructed this constitution have made deals for themselves, personal deals for their families and children, while leaving your children and my children to foot the bill and to pay debts that are going to benefit American banks, British banks, European institutions are going to get huge interest rates while the farmers make a lot of money, farmers get access to land while we are paying for that debt. It's unacceptable. We've got to do something. And that's why you need to take these videos seriously. We don't make them for fun. We don't make them to be popular. We don't make them so that we become celebrities. We make them so that we bring critical issues to you that might have repercussions on 5, 6 generations to come.